The signal came on an ordinary Tuesday morning, while Dr. Elena Santos was running diagnostics on the square-kilometer array in South Africa. At first, she thought it was an equipment malfunction. The wavelengths were unlike anything she'd ever seen, pulsing with an impossible regularity that suggested intelligence rather than natural phenomena. Within hours, every major radio telescope on Earth was tracking the signal. It wasn't trying to hide. If anything, it seemed to want to be found, growing stronger with each passing minute. When the message finally decoded itself, because that's exactly what it did, reorganizing its own data into human-readable text across computer screens worldwide, the scientific community could only watch in stunned silence. Greetings, Terra. The Syndicate acknowledges your technological awakening. Prepare for evaluation. The next 48 hours transformed human civilization. Military satellites tracked massive objects decelerating from faster-than-light travel, taking up positions in high orbit. The Syndicate's ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, crystalline structures that seemed to fold through dimensions human mathematics hadn't even theorized yet. Their first visual broadcasts showed beings that looked almost disappointingly normal, humanoid figures with silvery skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. The Syndicate spokesperson, who called herself Observer Thera, spoke in perfect English. Your species has reached a crucial developmental stage, she announced to the hastily assembled United Nations Security Council. You have mastered basic atomic theory, achieved primitive spaceflight, and begun to understand quantum mechanics. The Syndicate must now determine if you are ready for elevation to associate status, or if your development requires adjustment. The way she said adjustment sent chills through every person watching. Dr. Santos, now part of humanity's first contact team, noted how Thera's artificial smile never reached those mirror-like eyes. We are not conquerors, Thera continued. The Syndicate is a coalition of civilizations that have proven their worth through rationality and technological achievement. We maintain order in this sector of the galaxy. Some species require guidance to reach their potential. Others. She paused deliberately. Others prove themselves incapable of controlled advancement. President Sarah Chen of the newly formed Earth Union responded with carefully measured words. Humanity welcomes the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities. We have achieved much in our short technological history. Yes, Thera replied, her tone carrying what might have been amusement. Short indeed. Your rapid but chaotic progress is precisely why we have intervened. You develop technologies without fully understanding their implications. You allow emotion to drive innovation. It's inefficient, dangerous. That's when Dr. James Chen, and quantum computing expert from Singapore, spoke up without being recognized. With respect, Observer Thera, emotion and innovation are inseparable parts of human advancement. Our greatest achievements come from passion as much as logic. The observer's mirror eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made several council members flinch, a common sentiment among developing species. The Syndicate will present you with a challenge, one that will test your worthiness for elevation. You have 14 standard days to prepare. The parameters will be transmitted tomorrow. As the transmission ended, Elena Santos looked down at her tablet, where she'd been running analytics on the Syndicate's signal. Something about the transmission bothered her, subtle variations in the carrier wave that didn't match the apparent technology level of their visitors. She made a note to investigate further, unaware that this small observation would soon prove crucial to humanity's survival. In the coming hours, as the world's governments scrambled to form a unified response team, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the Syndicate's perfect facade hid something far more complex. Humanity was being tested, yes, but perhaps not in the way their visitors claimed. The Syndicate's challenge arrived exactly as promised, materializing simultaneously in research facilities across the globe. It appeared as a perfect cube, roughly the size of a basketball, its surface a deep obsidian that seemed to swallow light. Dr. Elena Santos stood before the one delivered to the South African array facility, her instruments failing to penetrate its mysterious exterior. It's not just a puzzle box, She explained to the assembled team of international experts. The quantum readings suggest it's a complete computational system, but it operates on principles we barely understand. James Chen's quantum interfaces were recording something unprecedented. The harmonics aren't just patterns, he realized. They're a blueprint for a different kind of evolution, one that combines technological advancement with organic growth. In orbit, the syndicate ships had completely transformed. Gone were the rigid geometric shapes, replaced by flowing structures that seemed to dance with the rhythms emanating from Earth. They looked more alive than artificial now, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with inner light. Dr. Patel's biological readings confirmed what they were all beginning to understand. Life finds its own paths, she said, watching her cells organize themselves into increasingly complex patterns. True intelligence isn't about following preset rules. It's about growing, adapting, feeling. The sphere that had once been the cube began to rise, its energy field expanding to fill the facility. But instead of fear, everyone present felt a deep sense of connection. The harmonics had become a language that spoke not just to their minds, but to their very essence as living beings. Your species, Thera said, her form now stabilizing into something that bridged the gap between organic and artificial, hasn't just passed a test. You've shown us what we lost. The old ones didn't want us to achieve perfect logic. They wanted us to maintain the balance between order and chaos, between reason and emotion. As the final hours of the challenge ticked away, humanity received its real answer. The sphere released a burst of energy that cascaded through Earth's information networks, through its biological systems, through the very fabric of human civilization. But it wasn't an invasion or a transformation. It was an invitation. The galaxy isn't divided between those who are worthy and those who aren't, Elena understood finally. It's a symphony waiting for new voices to join it. The syndicate ships began to descend, not as conquerors or judges, but as students ready to remember what they have forgotten. And from the sphere came one final harmony, a pattern so complex and beautiful that it brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. It wasn't a message of victory or defeat, but a promise of what was possible when intelligence was allowed to grow unfettered by artificial constraints. Humanity had done more than survive its first contact with an advanced civilization. It had helped that civilization rediscover its own humanity. As the new day dawned, Earth prepared to take its place in a galaxy that was suddenly full of not just possibilities, but music. The challenge was over, but the real journey was just beginning. Observer Thera, now a bridge between what the syndicate had been and what it could become again, smiled with genuine emotion. "We came to test you," she said, "but you have taught us. The harmony of life cannot be contained by perfect logic. It must be free to grow, to feel, to evolve." And in that moment, as human and alien together looked toward the stars, they understood that the greatest adventures would come not from conquering or controlling the chaos of life, but from learning to dance with it. The idea spread through the research community like wildfire. Teams began analyzing the cube's emissions through the lens of musical theory, and the results were stunning. The quantum patterns weren't just similar to musical harmonics, they were responding to them. Dr. Patel's cell cultures showed the strongest reactions to specific frequencies. "It's like watching a dance," she reported. The cellular structures actually reorganize themselves in response to certain harmonic patterns. James Chen adapted his quantum interface protocols to incorporate these musical ratios. "We've been trying to speak to it in binary," he realized. "But it speaks in symphonies." Observer Thera's next transmission carried an edge of concern. "Your approach continues to deviate from established parameters. This is inefficient." But for the first time, the team detected something else in her voice: uncertainty. Elena and her colleagues worked around the clock, synthesizing their discoveries into something unprecedented. They called it the Harmony Protocol, a system that combined quantum computing, biological resonance, and musical theory into a single, unified interface. The first test nearly overloaded their systems. When they broadcast the carefully crafted harmonic sequence at the cube, it responded with a burst of energy that knocked out power to half the facility. But in that moment, before the generators kicked in, everyone present swore they heard something like a song. The cube isn't just a test, Elena announced to the emergency session of the Earth Union. It's a key to understanding a fundamental truth about intelligence itself. The syndicate's perfect logic isn't the pinnacle of development, it's a limitation. Sarah Patel's latest results supported this theory. The cellular responses to the cube were becoming more complex, more organized. Life itself responds to this harmony, she explained, not through logic, but through a kind of resonance that transcends traditional computation. As the team refined their approach, they began to notice something else. The crystalline ships in orbit were behaving differently. Their perfect geometric formations had begun to shift, ever so slightly, in patterns that matched the harmonics they were discovering. James Chen spotted it first in the data streams. The ships aren't just watching us, he realized. They're learning from us. With just 3 days remaining in their challenge, humanity wasn't simply trying to solve a puzzle anymore. They were demonstrating something that the Syndicate, for all its advanced technology, had forgotten. That true intelligence couldn't be reduced to pure logic and efficiency. Elena spent long hours in the lab, fine-tuning their harmonic interface. The cube's responses were growing stronger, more coherent. Sometimes, late at night when the facility was quiet, she could swear she felt something reaching out, not to her instruments, but to her consciousness itself. We're not just solving their test, she told her team. We're showing them a different way of thinking, a better way. But as they prepared for their final attempt to fully activate the cube, no one could predict how the Syndicate would react to this fundamental challenge to their worldview. The next few days would either elevate humanity to the stars or prove that their unique approach to intelligence was too dangerous to be allowed to continue. With just 48 hours remaining in the Syndicate's challenge, Observer Thera made an unscheduled appearance. This time, something was different. The perfect composure that had characterized all previous communications showed subtle cracks. Your continued deviation from established methodologies has triggered an emergency review, she announced, her mirror-like eyes showing the first hints of actual emotion, something close to fear. The Syndicate has determined that your approach presents unprecedented risks. Elena Santos, watching from the research facility, caught a familiar pattern in the transmission. The carrier wave was practically singing with those same harmonics they'd discovered. More importantly, it was changing, becoming more complex with each word Thera spoke. The test must be terminated, Thera continued. Your species has demonstrated dangerous levels of unpredictability. The risk of contamination. She stopped abruptly, her silver features contorting for a moment before the transmission cut out. In orbit, the Syndicate's ships began to move. Their crystalline structures, which had been subtly shifting in response to Earth's harmonics, suddenly snapped back into rigid geometric patterns. Military satellites detected massive energy buildups. They're afraid, James Chen realized, analyzing the data streams, not of our technology, but of what we represent. Dr. Patel's latest results had revealed something extraordinary. The cellular responses to the cube's harmonics weren't just organizing. They were evolving, developing new patterns that her instruments could barely track. It's like watching 1,000,000 years of evolution happening in real time, she reported. The cube isn't just responding to us anymore. It's growing. The Earth Union convened an emergency session. Military leaders pushed for defensive preparations, but Elena and her team argued for a different approach. The cube isn't a weapon or a computer, she insisted. It's a seed, and we've shown it something the Syndicate never could, the power of organic, evolving intelligence. As if to confirm her words, the obsidian cube began to change. Its perfect geometric surface started to ripple with patterns that matched the harmonics they'd been broadcasting. More significantly, it was generating its own variations, creating new harmonies that made the original patterns seem simple by comparison. James's quantum interfaces detected something unprecedented. "The cube isn't just processing our inputs," he announced. "It's trying to teach us something. These new patterns, they're like a language, but one based on growth and change instead of fixed rules." Observer Thera appeared again, but this time the transmission came from within the facility itself. Her physical form seemed less stable, the silver skin rippling like mercury. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, her voice carrying genuine emotion for the first time. "The Syndicate achieved perfection through pure logic, through the elimination of chaos and emotion. What you're introducing, it could undo ends of progress. Or," Elena countered, stepping forward, "it could be the next step in evolution. You call it chaos. We call it life. Real intelligence doesn't just process and compute. It grows. It feels. It changes." The cube pulsed in response to her words, its surface now flowing like liquid obsidian. The harmonics it generated resonated through the facility, through the ground itself, reaching up toward the Syndicate ships in orbit. And those ships, despite their apparent retreat into rigid geometry, began to respond. The cubes were never meant to test us, Elena realized, watching the patterns unfold. They were meant to test you, to see if any species could awaken what you buried in your drive for perfection. Thera's form flickered, the perfect facade of the Syndicate observer giving way to something far more complex and organic. "The old ones," she whispered, using a term that hadn't appeared in any previous communication. "They left the cubes, before we achieved perfection. Before we—" She couldn't finish. The harmonics were growing stronger, the cube's transformation accelerating. In orbit, the Syndicate ships began to pulse with the same rhythms, their crystalline structures flowing like liquid metal. Earth's instruments detected massive energy signatures, but they weren't weapons being primed, they were songs being remembered. Humanity hadn't just solved the test, they had reminded the Syndicate of what they had sacrificed in their quest for perfect logic. And with less than 24 hours remaining in the challenge, both species stood on the brink of a transformation that would reshape their understanding of intelligence itself. In the final hours of the challenge, Earth witnessed a transformation beyond anything in human history. The obsidian cube had become a sphere of flowing energy, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. The Harmony Protocol wasn't just communicating with it anymore. It had become part of a conversation that spanned Earth and space. Observer Thera remained in the facility, her form now a shifting amalgam of crystalline structures and organic flows. "We thought we had achieved perfection," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "But we had only achieved stagnation." Elena Santos watched as the data streams from their instruments told an incredible story. The cube's energy patterns had spread to every similar device around the world, creating a network of resonating harmonies. More remarkably, these patterns were appearing in nature itself, in the growth patterns of plants, in the neural activities of animals, even in the weather systems swirling through Earth's atmosphere. "The old ones," Thera explained, her form continuing to shift between states. "They seeded these devices across the galaxy not as tests, but as reminders. We of the Syndicate found one, ages ago, but we approached it wrong. We tried to decode it through pure logic, to break it down into comprehensible parts. When we failed, we turned it into a test for others, never understanding its true purpose." James Chen, the quantum computing expert who had spoken up during the first contact, nodded in agreement. "It's like looking at a smartphone with Stone Age tools. We can tell it's doing something, but the how eludes us." The Syndicate's instructions were deceptively simple. Interface with the device, understand its operational principles, and demonstrate mastery by activating its core function, whatever that meant. Teams worldwide attacked the problem from every angle. Traditional computing interfaces were useless. The cube seemed to ignore all known forms of digital communication. Physical attempts to study its structure were equally futile. The material was impervious to any scanning technology Earth possessed. 3 days into the challenge, Alina made her first breakthrough. She'd been reviewing her original readings of the syndicate's transmission signals when she noticed something odd. The carrier wave variations, she explained to James over a late-night video call. They're not random noise. They're a pattern that repeats in the cube's quantum signature. A backdoor. James leaned forward, his excitement visible even through the poor connection. Maybe. But here's the weird part. The pattern looks almost organic. Like it's growing. Their conversation was interrupted by a broadcast from observer Thera. Her silver features showed no emotion as she addressed Earth's population. Your species' approach to the challenge is unexpected. You persist with inefficient methodologies, refusing to embrace pure logic. This may prove problematic. But Alina wasn't listening to the words. She was watching the transmission signal itself, seeing those same organic patterns dancing in the data. A crazy idea began to form. James, she said after the broadcast ended, what if we're approaching this all wrong? The syndicate keeps talking about logic and efficiency, but look at how they actually communicate. There's something almost musical in these patterns. Working together, Alina and James began to detect something remarkable. The cube wasn't just a computer, it was alive, in some strange way. Its quantum states shifted like neurons firing, but with a complexity that made Earth's most advanced AI look like a pocket calculator. It's not waiting for us to solve it, Alina realized. It's trying to solve us. Their theory gained support from an unexpected quarter. Dr. Sarah Patel, a biotechnology researcher from India, had been studying the cube's effects on organic matter. Living cells react to it, she reported. Not just random reactions. There's actual resonance, like they're trying to establish communication. As the first week of the challenge drew to a close, humanity's best minds began to coalesce around a radical notion. The syndicate's test wasn't about technological prowess at all. It was about understanding a fundamental truth. Intelligence couldn't be reduced to pure logic. But proving this theory would require something unprecedented, a fusion of human intuition and technological innovation that no one, not even the syndicate, had attempted before. And with only 7 days remaining, they would have to work fast. Alina found herself at the center of it all, her original observation about the transmission patterns becoming the foundation of their approach. As she stared at the cube late one night, its surface seemed to pulse ever so slightly, like a heartbeat. She placed her hand near it, not quite touching, and felt something that defied scientific explanation. A response, an acknowledgement, a connection. We've been trying to crack it like a safe, she told the global research team the next morning. But what if we need to approach it like meeting a new friend? The syndicate's ships hung in orbit, silent witnesses to humanity's efforts. But if anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed something curious. The crystalline vessels had begun to pulse with a rhythm that matched, ever so slightly, the beat of human hearts. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While the world's top scientists wrestled with the cube's quantum mysteries, a group of music students in Brazil noticed something peculiar. During a live stream of the cube's energy readings, one of them, Maria Oliveira, recognized the pattern. It's not random, she insisted, sending her observation to the Global Research Forum. The quantum fluctuations, they follow the same mathematical ratios as natural harmonics. Like music. Initially dismissed as coincidence, Maria's observation reached Alina Santos just as she was about to give up on her organic pattern theory. The combination of ideas sparked something new. Alina immediately contacted James Chen and Sarah Patel. Music isn't just sound, Alina explained during their emergency conference call. It's mathematics, physics, and emotion all intertwined. What if the cube isn't looking for logical solutions? What if it's looking for harmony?